Some men spend their whole lives trying to earn a seat at somebody else's table. I spent mine building my own table, in silence, for 30 years, and I only had to burn it down for one man to understand it was never his to judge. Keep that in mind, because everything I'm about to tell you will make a lot more sense once you understand that about me. Welcome back to the channel. Pour your coffee, get settled, and remember, every person in this story had a chance to do right. They chose otherwise. Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe if you're new here. You're going to want to stick around for this one. It was a Thursday morning in late April, out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. One of those mornings where the sky's still got a little chill in it, but you can feel summer leaning in close behind it. I was out back of my place in the Brookside area, hands full of grease, working on the transmission of an old international pickup I'd been fixing up for going on 2 years, when my phone started buzzing in my shirt pocket. Marcus. Why's he calling me at 9:15 on a workday? Boy hasn't missed a shift in 11 years. I wiped my hands on a rag and picked up anyway. Marcus, everything all right, son? Nothing. Just breathing. The kind of breathing a man does when he's trying not to come apart on the phone with his own father. Dad. His voice cracked right there on that one word, and something in my chest pulled tight like a wire. I'm over at Chandler Park. Can you come get me? I was already walking for my truck keys. Don't you move an inch. I found him on a bench near the pond, the same one where I used to bring him to feed the ducks when he was 6 years old. Except he wasn't 6 anymore. He was 31, and he was sitting there with his shoulders folded in like there was a hand pressing down on the back of his neck. And right next to him, my granddaughter, little Ruthie, 4 years old, sat swinging her feet, hugging a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Quiet in that particular way. Kids get quiet when they know something's wrong, but nobody's told them what yet. She had on her little pink coat and my old Oklahoma Sooners cap sitting sideways on her head, the one I'd given her for Christmas. And at Marcus's feet, 2 suitcases. Not backpacks. Suitcases. 2 suitcases. Lord have mercy. I didn't say a word right off. I sat down on the other side of my granddaughter, put my arm around her little shoulders, and looked out over that pond for a good 5 seconds before I turned my head toward my son. Why aren't you at the shop? Marcus let out a laugh that wasn't really a laugh at all. The kind that comes out of a man when everything hurts so bad, laughing is the only thing left to do with his face. I got let go, Dad. Let go, I repeated it, flat. From Bramwell Steel. Yeah. The job you've had 8 years? 8 years. I nodded slow. Okay, Walt. Stay level, old man. And the suitcases? He rubbed at the back of his neck. Wouldn't look me in the eye. Harold came by the house last night. To the house? Said he'd been making some calls. Turns out, he's tight with the plant manager over at Bramwell. Marcus stopped, swallowed hard. He's the one who got me fired, Dad. The pond kept rippling. The wind kept moving through the branches, and Ruthie kept hugging her rabbit like the world wasn't quietly falling apart 3 feet away from her. Harold Kessler, I said. Your father-in-law, my former father-in-law. Marcus's jaw went tight. Denise filed this morning. I turned and looked at him full on. All of this. Since last night, he told her to do it. Marcus's voice dropped low, near a whisper. He called her after he stormed out of our house, and told her, if she stayed married to me, he was cutting her off from everything. The house money. The trust. All of it. He stopped again, swallowed. Said our family wasn't Kessler material. Said we didn't have the pedigree to carry his grandkid's name. Pedigree. I sat with that word a minute. Let it hang there between us, same as something dropped on the floor that neither one of us wanted to be the one to pick up. Dad. Marcus finally looked up at me, and his eyes were rimmed red. I don't even know what I did wrong. I gave that family everything I had. 8 years. I drove Harold's mother to her chemo appointments every single Tuesday for 2 years. I built that man a deck with my own 2 hands. His voice cracked clean in half. And he just threw us out like we didn't matter. Like Ruthie didn't matter. Ruthie looked up at the sound of her name. Grandpa, she said, dead serious, holding up her rabbit. His name is Mr. Buttons. I looked at that little girl. Her mother's chin, my own mother's eyes, 4 years old, and not the least bit troubled because she trusted the grown folks around her had it handled. He's a fine rabbit, sweetheart, I told her. Grandpa's got this handled. I stood up slow, the way I do when my mind's already 3 steps down the road and my body's just now catching up to it. Grab the bags, son. Marcus blinked. What? The bags, Marcus. Pick them up. I reached down and took Ruthie's little hand in mine. We are not doing this on a park bench. Dad, where are we? Get in the truck. He knew that tone. Every son alive knows that particular tone. The one you don't argue with. He grabbed both bags without another word out of him. We drove north on Peoria, then cut over onto the turnpike, headed toward Sand Springs. Marcus kept sneaking looks at me sideways, waiting on me to explain myself, waiting on me to say something comforting, something fatherly. Instead, I reached over and turned the radio on. Merle Haggard. Seemed about right. Dad. You're making me nervous. Good. I checked the mirror. Means you're paying attention. Where are we going? 30 years, son. 30 years I've kept this quiet. 30 years of early mornings, late nights, handshake deals, every dollar I ever made going straight back into the ground instead of into my own pocket. Not a word about it to a soul. Not my brother, not the fellas down at church, not even your mother knew the whole shape of it, God rest her. Not the entire picture, anyhow. 30 years, being the man in the little rancher on Xanthus Avenue, driving a truck with 210,000 miles on it, because I watched my own daddy get robbed clean the day people found out what he was worth. I wasn't going to make that same mistake twice in one family. But Harold Kessler just made a mistake of his own. He looked at my boy, my own blood, and decided we weren't good enough to sit at his table. He pulled strings to end my son's career. He tore apart his family. He put my 4-year-old granddaughter out on a park bench with 2 suitcases packed on a Thursday in my city. We came off the turnpike onto a stretch of road out past Sand Springs, past the grain elevators and the equipment yards, until I turned into a long gravel drive behind a building that stretched near on 3 city blocks. Marcus sat up straight in his seat. The sign over the front entrance was plain, brushed, steel letters, nothing showy. Prairie Ridge, Fabrication, and Supply. Dad. Marcus's voice had gone quiet, but a different kind of quiet now. What is this place? I parked, killed the engine, and sat there a second, looking at what 30 years of keeping my mouth shut had built. This, I told him, is your inheritance. I opened my door. And we've got a contract that needs revisiting. He had no idea yet what that meant, but Harold Kessler was fixing to find out. If you've stuck with me this long, and you're wanting more stories like this one, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Means more than you know. Now, back to it. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a room when folks realize they've been underestimating somebody their whole lives. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, soft, like dust, after the ground stops shaking. I'd been living inside that kind of quiet my entire career. Harold Kessler was about to get his introduction to it. Friday morning, 7 o'clock sharp. I was already on the floor at Prairie Ridge before the first shift clocked in. Been doing that since I was 30-some years old, and never once broke the habit. You want to know if a business is healthy, don't look at the ledgers first. Look at who's there before anybody else, and who's still there after everybody's gone home. My office sat up on the 2nd floor, corner room, big glass windows looking down over the floor below, nothing fancy. Desk, couple chairs, whiteboard covered in numbers that would have turned Harold Kessler's stomach sour. I kept one photograph on the corner of my desk. Marcus, at 10 years old, holding up a catfish nearly as big as he was, grinning like he'd whipped the whole world. I looked at that picture every single morning of my life. That Friday, it hit different than usual. My plant manager, a big square-shouldered man out of Muskogee named Dale Robichaux, knocked twice and walked in right at 7:30. Same as always. Dale had been with me 19 years, knew every bolt in that building. He also had a way of knowing, without a word said, when something was moving. He took one look at my face and sat himself down. You want your coffee first, or you want to just get into it? Pull the Kessler account, I said. Dale's eyebrows went up a good 1/4 inch. Bramwell Steel. That's the one. He already had his clipboard out. They're mid-contract, Walt. Got 14 months left on the supply agreement. Fasteners and componentry, mostly. Runs about $1.8 million a year through us. $1.8 million. And Harold Kessler had spent 8 years sitting at holiday dinners, bragging about his thriving steel supply outfit, never once mentioning that the whole engine underneath it, the very contract making his numbers look so pretty, ran straight through my building. The man called my family unfit to carry his name while he was cashing checks with my signature on them. I about smiled. Not quite. I'm not canceling the contract, I told Dale. He waited. I'm restructuring it. I leaned back in my chair. Pull every clause on vendor performance review. I want a formal evaluation notice drafted up. Keep the language plain. Nothing hostile. Just notify Bramwell Steel that Prairie Ridge is conducting a full vendor review, effective today. All payments held pending that review. Standard procedure, I added. It's written right into the contract. Page 9, Section 3. I know, because I'm the one who wrote it. They've got 30 days to respond before we make a call on whether the contract continues. He nodded slow, the way a man nods when he understands that something sounding routine on paper is anything but underneath. And who's running the review? I picked up the photograph of Marcus off my desk, turned it back to face me, and set it back down. The new director of vendor relations. Dale blinked. We do as of 9 o'clock this morning. He picked up on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. He'd slept in his childhood bedroom that night, first time in 9 years, him and Ruthie both. She was curled up in the middle of that old twin bed while Marcus folded himself around the edge of it like a man trying not to take up too much space in his own life. Dad, it's early. It's near 9. Didn't fall asleep till after 4. Fair enough. How's my girl? Pause. I heard him shift, probably checking on her. Still out cold. Sleeping like nothing happened. That's because she knows she's safe. I let that sit a second. Both of you are. You hear me? Dad. Marcus. I said his name the way I used to when he was 17 and getting in his own way. I need you listening close right now, all right? Not as my boy. As a grown man about to step into something real, quiet on the line. I need you at Prairie Ridge by 10. Business clothes. We're going to walk that floor together. I'm going to introduce you around, and then you and me are going to sit down, and I'm going to explain exactly what I've spent 30 years building and where you fit into it going forward. More quiet. Then, Dad, what is Prairie Ridge? Son, it's ours. Has been for 30 years. I picked up my coffee. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. I hung up before he could ask me another thing. Some things a man's got to see with his own 2 eyes to believe. He walked through the front doors at 9:58. I was standing out on the production floor when he came through. Watched him a minute through the glass before he ever spotted me. Watched him stop dead just past the entrance, tip his head back to take in the ceiling. 30-some feet up, cranes running along steel tracks, conveyor lines humming, 200 and some employees moving in that particular rhythm that only comes after years of building a culture right. His mouth hung open a little. Good. That's exactly the reaction I was hoping for. Dale met him at the door and walked him over to me. By the time Marcus reached me, he had the look of a man trying to solve arithmetic in his head that kept coming out too big to hold. Dad. He looked around, then back at me. This whole time? This whole time. You've been driving that same truck for going on 15 years. Still am. Mama knew? I paused. She knew enough, knew the parts that mattered. She also understood why we kept it close to the chest. Money changes people, son. The wrong folks find out what a man's really got, and all of a sudden everybody's got a handout and a story to go with it. I started walking, and he fell in step beside me. I wanted you standing on your own 2 feet first, building your own confidence, knowing whatever you turned into it on your own merit, not mine. He didn't say anything for a good while as we walked that floor. Workers nodded at me as we passed. A couple introduced themselves to Marcus. A woman named Verna, out of the fastener line, shook his hand and told him, "You've got your daddy's whole face." We ended up back in my office. I shut the door, poured us both coffee, and laid 3 folders out across the desk. Financials, the org chart, and the Bramwell Steel vendor file. Marcus picked up that last one. I watched his face while he read it. Watched the second he registered the company name. Watched his jaw go tight. Bramwell Steel, he said, quiet. That's Harold's company. He's a vendor here, I said. Has been going on 8 years. Marcus set the folder down, looked up at me. You're telling me while Harold Kessler was sitting at his own dinner table, telling everybody we weren't fit to carry his name, he was making his living off your company? The room went real still. Then Marcus said, with a calm that genuinely caught me off guard, "What's in the folder?" A vendor performance evaluation notice. Payments held pending review. I slid it over to him. Standard procedure. And who's running the review? I slid the second document across. A formal offer letter. Director of Vendor Relations. Prairie Ridge Fabrication. A compensation package that would have made his old paycheck at Bramwell look like pocket change. His hands went still on the desk. "Dad, I've never done anything close to this before." "You drove that man's mother to chemo every Tuesday for 2 years," I said. "You built his back deck with your own hands. You showed up to every holiday and every family obligation with your whole heart in it." I leaned forward. "You already know how to show up, Marcus. That's most of leadership right there. Rest of it, I'll teach you myself." He stared at that offer letter a long moment. "Go on, son. Pick it up." He picked it up. "When Harold gets that evaluation notice," he said slow, "he's going to know something's off. He's going to start making calls," I agreed. "He's going to ask around. And eventually," I leaned back, "he's going to find out exactly whose building he's been sitting inside of for 8 years. Marcus looked at me. "And then what?" "Oh, that's the good part." "Then," I said, "he's going to have to call you." The quiet that followed was about the most satisfied quiet I'd felt in 30 years of building a thing out in the dark where nobody could see it. Marcus set the offer letter down, picked up a pen off my desk, and signed it. Harold Kessler's evaluation notice went out at 5 that Friday evening. By Saturday morning, I had 4 missed calls off a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized it just fine. I let every one of them roll to voicemail. He wasn't ready to talk to me yet. He needed to talk to my son first. And Marcus, for the first time in 2 nights, slept clean through till morning. Marcus was standing when Harold came through the door. Not sitting behind the desk, trying to look important. Standing, relaxed, jacket buttoned, hands easy at his sides. Office was clean and quiet. That flat gray Oklahoma light coming through the windows, the floor below humming along steady as a heartbeat that had never once skipped a step. He looked, if I'm honest, like a man who'd belonged in that room his whole life. Harold stopped in the doorway. The quiet held a good 4 seconds. I counted it from the hallway, standing just out of sight, close enough to hear every word, far enough to give my son his own room to stand in. "Marcus." Harold's voice was careful, measured. The voice of a man who'd walked in expecting one kind of room and was already scrambling to recalculate. "Harold." Marcus gestured to the chair across the desk. "Appreciate you coming in. Have a seat." In an office Harold Kessler had been funding for 8 years, without ever once knowing whose name sat on the deed. I heard the chair scrape, heard the stillness that came after, that particular stillness of 2 men who've shared Thanksgiving tables and backyard cookouts, now sitting across from each other in a completely different kind of room. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," Harold started in. Smooth, practiced, the tone of a man used to talking his way into the better half of any situation. "About this evaluation notice. We've been a loyal vendor here, going on a decade, and I think if we just sit down and go through the numbers together, this relationship's always been mutually." "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus said. "Not loud, not sharp, just final. Prairie Ridge runs regular vendor evaluations. Standard procedure. It's written right into your contract." A short pause. Page 9, Section 3. Quiet settled over that room like wet concrete. "Marcus." Harold's voice dropped a register, softer now. The involuntary kind of soft that comes when a man feels the ground shift underneath him. "Look, I understand things between our families are complicated right now. I understand there's feelings tied up in this, and I'm not dismissing that, but business is business, and I don't think we need to let personal matters cloud what's been a very productive, professional." "You're right," Marcus said. "Business is business." Harold paused. Hadn't expected agreeing with him, which is exactly why I want to handle what happens next, the right way. I heard the sound of a folder sliding across the desk. "There it is. I've had our team draw up a revised vendor agreement," Marcus went on. "New terms, fair pricing, realistic delivery windows, standard performance clauses, nothing punitive, nothing personal." Heavier quiet now. Harold was reading. I could picture it plain, the man in his good gray suit, silver hair. 8 years of comfortable assumptions coming apart line by line under a document drawn up by the son-in-law he'd thrown out of his daughter's life 4 days back. 4 days. Harold Kessler had turned our whole family's world over on a Wednesday night, and by that Sunday afternoon his entire business lifeline was sitting in Marcus Whitfield's hands. Inside a building his own father-in-law owned. The Lord's got himself a sense of humor. He just doesn't always show his hand right away. This Harold stopped. These terms are reasonable, he finally said. I know they are, Marcus said simply. I made sure of it. More quiet. Marcus. Harold's voice had shifted again, something underneath it now that hadn't been there when he first walked through that door, something older, quieter. Like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for a long stretch of years and could feel his own grip finally slipping. What I said about your family, about your... He stopped on the word, couldn't get it out a second time. I was wrong. I've been wrong about plenty for a long time, and I told myself it was principle. No, it's all right. I forgive you. I appreciate that. The honest answer of a man who's been hurt and isn't bothering to hide it. The review's going to run its course, Marcus went on. Whatever happens on the business end happens on the business end. But Ruthie needs her grandfather, her mother's father, whatever that looks like from here. That's between you and God and Denise. My jaw went tight out in that hallway, not from anger, from recognizing something, because that was the most honest thing Harold Kessler had ever said in my presence, and he didn't even know I was standing there to hear it. Marcus let the words sit, didn't rush in to fill the space, didn't offer cheap comfort or easy forgiveness dressed up as something bigger. He let the man sit inside his own truth a minute, which, if you're asking me, was a whole lot more grace than Harold Kessler had earned off anybody in that family. I appreciate that, Marcus said finally. Steady, warm, but not soft. Genuinely. Then, but I need you to hear something, Harold. His voice had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that runs a room better than any amount of volume ever could. Not as your vendor, not as your former son-in-law, as a man. I stopped breathing out there in the hall. My father built something out of nothing. 30 years, quietly, never asked a soul's permission or approval to do it. Another beat. He built it for this family, for our name, for Ruthie. I could hear the steadiness holding in every word of it. No shake to it, no performance, just plain truth. You looked at us and decided we weren't Kessler material. You made a phone call that cost me my job. You pushed my wife toward walking out on her own marriage. The room had gone dead still. And somehow you ended up sitting across a desk from me, in a building that decides whether your company survives the next quarter. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Then Marcus slid something else across that desk. A pen. My father taught me real power doesn't need to humiliate anybody. I shut my eyes out there, in the hallway. It just makes things real clear, is all. The quiet that followed had to be the longest 8 seconds of my whole life. Then, the soft, unmistakable scratch of a pen dragging across paper. Harold Kessler signed the contract. Marcus signed it right after him. Calm, unhurried. The way a man signs something he already made peace with a good while back. Nobody said another word about pedigree. Nobody made a speech about it. Nobody twisted the knife or raised their voice or did one thing more than what needed doing. Because nothing else needed doing anymore. Everybody in that room understood who'd come out on top. Didn't need saying out loud. Before Harold left the building that afternoon, he stopped by the front desk and asked Dale if he might see Ruthie sometime soon, maybe that weekend, if Denise was willing. Dale told him that'd be between the family to work out, but he didn't see why not. I heard later that Denise came around within the month. Not because Harold pushed her to. Because Marcus never once badmouthed the man to her, never gave her a reason to pick a side that wasn't already there to pick. She moved back into the house on her own say-so, on her own time, and by that summer, the 4 of them were sitting down to Sunday dinner together most weeks, Ruthie included, Mr. Buttons, and all. I walked downstairs, didn't go into the meeting, never had any plans to. Walked on out to the parking lot, stood next to my old truck, and looked up at that flat gray Oklahoma sky a good long while. 30 years. Not one day of it was ever really about getting even. Not truly. It was about building something solid enough, rooted deep enough, that when the storm finally did come knocking on my family's door, there'd be real ground under their feet to stand on. I thought about my own father, pressing $400 into my palm, every bit he had to his name in that moment, eyes wet with it. I thought about Marcus at 10 years old holding up that catfish like he'd whipped the whole world. I thought about Ruthie in that sideways cap, dead serious, telling me her rabbit's name like it was the most important thing I'd ever need to know. Pedigree. Harold Kessler had called my family unfit to carry his name. This was my family's name. A grandfather who built quiet. A father who showed up without ever once flinching. A granddaughter who didn't know yet what was being kept safe for her, but who'd spend the whole rest of her life standing inside the proof of it. No amount of money measures that. No contract. No good gray suit. I got in my truck, turned Merle Haggard back up, and drove home in my old truck, from my own company, through my own city, same as I had for 30 years. Quiet. Whole. Undefeated. If this one meant something to you, do me a favor and hit that like button, and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next one. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And like always, thank you for sitting with me a while. I'll see you next time.